The canyon opened suddenly, a wound in the red earth, where shadows gathered and cool air clung to the stone. Caleb Hart reined his horse at the sound of rushing water, surprised to find a waterfall hidden this deep in Apache territory. He had followed the trail of stolen cattle for 3 days, boots dusty, throat dry, nerves tight from riding alone. The pool below the falls shimmered like something out of a dream, mist curling through shafts of late afternoon light. He dismounted quietly, meaning only to water his horse, when a voice, low, urgent, and unmistakably human, cut through the roar of falling water. "Cowboy! Don't look!" Caleb stiffened at once, hand lifting away from his gun. "My dress is gone," the voice whispered, strained but proud, as if asking for decency rather than mercy. Without hesitation, Caleb turned his back to the waterfall, eyes fixed on the canyon wall, pulse thudding harder than any gunfight had ever made it. He tipped his hat slightly, voice calm. "Ma'am, I ain't looking. Didn't mean to intrude." Behind him, water thundered, followed by the soft rustle of movement and fabric. He became acutely aware of everything: the heat on his neck, the creak of his saddle, the fact that this land was not his, and that he was suddenly very much a guest. When she spoke again, it was closer, steadier. "You may turn now." He did, slowly, and saw her standing at the edge of the pool, wrapped in a woven cloth, chin lifted, eyes dark and sharp with watchfulness. She carried herself like someone used to command, not apology. "I am Nalin," she said. "You follow stolen cattle. They crossed our land." Caleb nodded, struck by how easily she read him. "I aim to take them back, or stop whoever took them." For a long moment, she studied his face, measuring his words against his posture, his tone, the way his hands stayed open at his sides. Finally, she inclined her head. "Then our paths cross for a reason." The mist drifted between them, cool and thin, as if the canyon itself were holding its breath. Caleb felt it then, a quiet certainty that this meeting, awkward and charged and strange, was no accident at all, and that neither of them would leave the waterfall unchanged. Morning broke hard and bright, the sun spilling over the canyon rim and painting the red dust gold. Caleb and Nalin moved without ceremony, as if the decision to ride together had been made long before either spoke it aloud. She studied the ground near the waterfall, fingers brushing the dirt, reading signs invisible to him. He watched the horizon, hand resting near his reins, alert to movement. Their skills complemented each other naturally, and that unsettled Caleb more than danger ever had. He was used to solitude, to trusting only his horse and his instincts. Yet here he was, following the quiet certainty of an Apache scout through land that answered to her footsteps. They rode through narrow passes where the wind carried voices that weren't there, past scrub and stone marked by old stories. Nalin spoke little, but when she did, her words mattered. She pointed out broken brush, a shifted rock, a faint hoofprint leading west. The smugglers were moving fast and careless, confident no one would follow them this deep. Caleb shared what he knew in return: the size of the herd, the men likely involved, the kind of weapons they favored. Each exchange tightened an invisible thread between them. At midday, they stopped beneath a lone cottonwood. As Caleb unsaddled the horse, a sudden gust tore loose the tie holding Nalin's hair. It spilled down her back like dark water. He turned away at once, adjusting his gear with deliberate focus. She noticed, when he glanced back, her lips curved into a brief surprised smile, gone as quickly as it appeared. But it lingered in his thoughts long after. By afternoon, the trail sharpened. Fresh tracks cut through the dust, and smoke smudged the sky far ahead. Nalin's jaw set, eyes narrowing. "They camp near the old cliffs," she said. "They think themselves hidden." Caleb nodded, feeling the weight of what lay ahead settle into his bones. Danger no longer felt distant. It rode beside them, patient and certain. That evening they made camp in a shallow ravine. Firelight flickered against stone, casting long shadows that danced and vanished. They sat across from each other, sharing dried meat and silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The night sounds grew louder, crickets, the soft stamp of the horse, wind sliding over rock. Caleb caught her watching the fire, the flames reflected in her eyes, and wondered what she saw there. She met his gaze without flinching. Nothing was said, yet something had shifted. This was no longer just a shared hunt. It was the beginning of trust, and both of them knew how rare and how dangerous that could be. Dusk fell fast in the canyon, the light draining from the stone as if the land itself were bracing. Caleb felt it before he heard it, the wrong kind of stillness. The way birds went quiet when danger slipped too close. Nolin's hand lifted slightly, a silent warning, and he obeyed without thinking, easing his horse to cover among the rocks. Voices drifted on the wind, rough and careless, followed by the clink of metal. The smugglers had returned to their camp earlier than expected. The first shot shattered the calm. Caleb rolled, gun already in his hand, firing toward the flash of movement near the fire. Nolin was beside him an instant later, swift and sure, her blade catching the light as she moved through shadow like it belonged to her. They fought back to back without a word, each trusting the other to guard what they could not see. Gunfire cracked against canyon walls, echoes multiplying the chaos. Dust burned Caleb's throat. Adrenaline drowned out everything but survival. When it ended suddenly. One man fled into the dark. The rest lay groaning or still, weapons scattered. Silence rushed back in, heavy and unreal. Caleb exhaled slowly, scanning the ground. That was when he saw the dark stains spreading along Nolin's sleeve. "You're hit," he said, already moving. She waved it off, but her breath caught just once. He guided her to the fire, hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. Tearing a strip from his shirt, he knelt and bound her arm carefully, eyes focused on the task, mindful of her space. She watched him, studying the gentleness in his touch as much as his restraint. "You could have left," she said quietly. "Many would have." Caleb shook his head. "Didn't feel right." Later the fire burned low. The captured men were tied and watched, the danger contained for now. Nolin sat with her back to a stone, the pain dulled but present. She spoke then of her people, of guarding the land and the cost of doing so. Caleb listened, really listened, and when it was his turn, he told her of the road that never seemed to end, of losses that pushed him onward even when he longed to stop. The fire popped softly between them. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed. Respect deepened into something warmer, heavier. Neither crossed the space between them, yet it felt charged all the same. Trust had been earned in blood and silence, and both understood how fragile and how powerful that made it. Morning arrived softly, pale light sliding into the canyon as the night's violence loosened its grip. The smugglers were handed over to the Apache warriors who came at dawn, their faces stern, their movements efficient. Nolin spoke with them in her language, voice calm and assured, and Caleb watched from a respectful distance, aware that this part of the story was not his to enter. When it was done, justice no longer rested on his shoulders, and the weight of it left him feeling oddly unsteady. Nolin returned to him as the others moved away, her wounded arm bound, but her posture unbroken. "Their trail ends here," she said. "Yours does not," Caleb nodded, knowing she spoke truth. The road had always called him onward, even when he wished it wouldn't. Still he lingered, reluctant to let the moment pass unmarked. She led him back through the winding path to the waterfall. The sun caught the falling water, turning it into a curtain of light and mist. The pool below lay calm, as if nothing dangerous had ever touched it. They stood near the edge, close enough to feel the cool spray on their skin, the roar of water swallowing every other sound. "This place," Nolin said, "is where paths cross and separate." She looked at him then, her gaze steady, searching. "You listened when you did not have to. You showed respect where many take." Caleb felt the words settle deep, heavier than praise. "You trusted me," he replied. "Didn't come easy, I reckon." A faint smile touched her mouth. "No, it did not." For a moment neither spoke. The space between them felt charged, filled with everything they would not say. Caleb wanted to reach out, to anchor the feeling before it slipped away, but he stayed still. Some things, he understood now, mattered because they were chosen freely, not taken. At last he tipped his hat. "If our paths cross again," he said, voice rougher than he meant, "I'd count myself fortunate." Nolin inclined her head, eyes bright. "The land remembers," she said. "So do I." Caleb mounted his horse and turned toward the open desert. He rode away slowly, resisting the urge to look back too often, letting the rhythm of hooves carry him forward. Behind him, the waterfall continued its endless fall, mist rising like a quiet promise. Nalin watched until the dust of his passing faded into the canyon light. She touched the binding on her arm, then the stone beside her, grounding herself in the place and the moment. Some meetings were brief, she knew, but they left long shadows. As she turned back toward her people, the sound of the water followed her, carrying with it the memory of a cowboy who had understood when not to look and why that mattered.